Hi, everyone. I'm Kristy Knichel, co-host of the LLC podcast. It's an honor to introduce listeners to inspiring women who are making a real difference in logistics and supply chain. With the LLC podcast, you'll hear inspirational stories, both personal and professional challenges our guests have overcome, how their backgrounds help to shape who they are today, and how they empower others to give back to their communities and often the world. Joining me today is Anne Reinke, President and CEO of the Transportation Intermediaries Association, or the TIA as it is known. Prior to joining TIA as their leader in 2020, Anne worked at the U.S. Department of Transportation. Her time in public service was preceded by a 16-year career in Washington, D.C. office of CSX Corporation, where Anne ultimately became the Vice President of Government Affairs, overseeing the federal, state government, and community affairs departments. Before joining CSX, she worked at the Association of American Railroads and the High Speed Ground Transportation Association. Thanks for being here, Anne. Let's dive
Thank
right in.
you.
You're welcome. So to start off, you're such an extensive background working with the railroads and government, and now as president and CEO of the TIA. Can you share with our listeners a little bit more about where you grew up, your education, any early influencers, mentors you may have had along the way?
Sure. Now, before I do this, though, I have to congratulate you because you are Entrepreneur of the Year. Is that Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania? Is it the city, the state? Tell me.
It's the Eastern Central region, so it's
Yes.
basically Ohio, West Virginia, Kentucky, and Western PA.
Oh my gosh. I bet
you.
that was a goal of yours that you probably didn't even know you had when you were, 20 years younger.
Actually, 2017, yes, it was a goal, and I was a finalist, and I didn't win, and got some advice why. Basically, I had to talk more about myself. And, I think like most of us humble people out there, but yeah, it was actually interesting because they said there was over like 1,000 applications, 30 finalists, and I was the only woman. So it was pretty cool though.
That is awesome. And you're a former TIA Distinguished Woman in Logistics as well.
I am, yeah.
So I am flattered to be included on your podcast. I appreciate it.
Thank you. So
All right. You
go
want me to talk
ahead.
about myself?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. All right, I'll do it. I'll stop talking about you and I'll just talk about me from now on.
Thank you.
That's true, though. I think I'm like you. I'd rather ask questions than answer them, but I'll probably start bloviating here and you'll have to cut me off. But anyway, so I'm from Washington, D.C. area, and my parents have always been pretty political. They're from South Africa originally. And so we grew up talking a lot about politics and, communism and capitalism, all this stuff. And it's hard not to let it sink into you when you're talking about it at the dinner table. And so I guess that set me on a course of being interested in politics and sort of being interested in potentially being in politics. Once I saw what politics was, I kind of realized I don't want that life, but I appreciate the fact that I'm interested in those topics. And so that's kind of how I set the trajectory for my life, like, majoring in political science and history in college, and then going to law school, because it's there's advocacy up front and personal. That's what you learn in law school. And then from there, I moved back to DC and I really kind of got into it. I started out as a lawyer. I didn't love it. I was kind of doing work that a trained monkey could do. It was a lot of document review and document production. And so I thought, well, that's not advocacy. That's not what I want to do. And so advocacy in its purest form, really, I guess, is lobbying. And so that's how I got into lobbying, government affairs, et cetera. And why did I end up at DOT? Well, you know this, Kristy, because you have a lot of intermodal facing business. CSX has gone through a huge trajectory where they had a management completely ousted back in 2017. They had a new CEO come in and then subsequently pass away. There was a lot of turmoil at CSX, and I kind of wanted out. And so I had never done public service. And so I thought, what a good opportunity. They called me once they found out I was leaving, and I got to really be part of an administration that, for all its ups and downs, they were trying to do some good things with transportation bills, et cetera. So if I hadn't had that job, I probably wouldn't have ended up at the TIA. So I'm eternally grateful for it.
Now, that's an awesome story, to be quite honest. I always say myself too, I'm not really inclined on the political side, but I myself, obviously, the last few years being in business and with all the challenges going on, getting a little bit more involved in politics myself. So definitely interesting. Next thing, did you envision that you would be working in so closely with the federal government that early stages in your career? I mean, I guess you kind of covered that a little bit, but maybe not to the tune where you're at today.
Yeah, I don't think so. I guess I didn't realize until working for a regulated industry like the railroads how much uh, how much the government oversees all aspects of it. And even in our industry, in the logistics industry, as you know, we have a government, a safety regulator, and they're kind of almost branching into economic regulation. And of course, we're trying to prevent that. But my point is, you have to be up there and interested in what's going on in politics and in Washington, D.C., because they're actually touching your business and they're affecting it. So the railroads is a great example because it's a highly regulated industry. Ours is also a regulated industry that we need to pay attention to, perhaps not as heavily as the railroads. But if we're not up here making the case of why a particular regulation or particular piece of legislation doesn't make any sense, who's going to make it for us? Nobody. You have to be up here to represent yourself and advocate for what matters. And I think further, we want to be issue experts. Members of Congress have, God knows, multiple committee assignments, any number of constituent issues, any number of personal issues that they care about. And so they cannot be expected to know everything there is to know about our industry. So again, if we're not up there explaining ourselves, who will be? No one's volunteering to take that banner up without us being there. So I think that's why it's always been interesting to me to be part of it, but critical that we are.
Yeah, no, I think that's very important. I actually had a conversation this morning with a customer that ships ag product with the railroads direct and having some issues. And I know that's actually been on the news lately about some of these farmers, complaining about, those issues that are going on. And, I think having that conversation with the customer and them understanding, me even directing them a little bit and telling them what they need to be doing so that they can get the job done for their customers in turn is important, because a lot of people don't know. They don't realize how important it is to advocate for your business and you make sure other people understand.
Yeah. And I won't name any names because we don't want to defame anybody, but I was talking to a member of Congress and I was talking about a particular issue that was affecting them. And they said, you know what, that company hasn't even been in to see me, has not come in to say anything to me about it. And all I can do is try to get their attention through writing letters. And I mean, so there you go. From the horse's mouth, you do need to be in there. Otherwise, if they feel pressure to act against you and you're not in there to say don't, well, then they're going to do it.
Right. And I think what you're doing and what you're saying is really getting the message out, and probably more now than ever, which is great. So, and how does the TIA, well, I'm very familiar with the TIA. Obviously, I'm a member and I have been for a long time. But, if you can talk a little bit and tell the listeners more about the TIA and what the TIA do for their members, that would be great.
Yeah. And Kristy, you do a fabulous job. Not only are you a member, but you're also a board member and you're the committee chair of the Intermodal Logistics Conference, which is, I think, a critical component of our committee structure because it allows people who may not know about intermodal what exactly that means, how to make it successful, what the issues are. And as you just referenced, there are a lot of issues right now. But here's what we do. It's sort of like a four-legged stool. We have advocacy on the one hand, which I've just talked about, which is getting in front of members of Congress, getting in front of the FMCSA or the Federal Maritime Commission to talk about what issues we're experiencing, what our position is on particular pieces of legislation or regulations, and how they could affect us. And those folks, Chris Burrows, who runs that department, has a committee structure. And one of those committees is the one I just referenced that you chair, that really coalesce what our perspectives are on those issues that affect us, and then provides Chris his sort of marching orders as to what to really say and push for on Capitol Hill. So, if the Highway Logistics Conference wants to come together about, all right, what do we think about dispatchers and how should they be treated compared to brokers, right? That's a conversation they had yesterday. That's a guidance document that we're weighing in on that provides him the information that we need. So we have advocacy. Then we have, of course, networking through our annual meeting, through our other events like Technovations, which is really technology specific, but that provides those people in the logistics industry the access to the best of the best, those people who are really making a difference in logistics, who have either scaled or in the midst of scaling their businesses, and give you all the tips and everything that you would possibly need to make yourself successful. And I know, I was at my first annual conference in person, because the last 2 years have been over Zoom, God save us. But my first in-person one, and I was really struck because I talked to a guy who it was his first ever, and he said, I came to this conference thinking I'd learn, but he said, this is what I learned, how far behind I am. I have got to do everything I can to write down all my notes and start implementing as soon as I get back. And that to me was so significant, because I think that's the importance. That's why we have networking events. And then the last two, education, which is we really try to educate those people just starting out and those people in the middle of their career, like through the certified transportation broker, those who are looking at trying to become a leader in their company through the Leadership Academy. It's really kind of soup to nuts, anything that affects your business that if you don't have an education department in your company, which many don't, this provides that education department for you. And finally, providing services like the bond and TIA Watchdog. The bond is a legal requirement for a broker. Watchdog allows you to report on carriers that you have had a negative experience with, and to monitor those carriers when you're making a selection. So that's sort of us in a nutshell.
Awesome. And I'm very familiar with that. I actually ran into a couple of people there myself that was their first time, and same thing, way behind, didn't realize that this was even out there, so many tools. So I think it's definitely very beneficial. So, talking a little bit about more the TIA, how does the TIA make use of the valuable data that it has to access to across all the transportation modes, and how can your members best leverage this to their benefit?
Yeah. So one of the services I mentioned is when I talk about services I didn't mention, but I should have, is we have a market report that we have produced quarterly. And that market report looks at retrospectively a quarter's worth of data about volumes, gross revenues, the size of the company, what kind, is it intermodal, is it truckload, is it less than truckload? And so that gives us a pretty good snapshot of how we're doing as an industry, how you're doing compared to your competitors, et cetera. What I think that market report can provide, though, is even more data that can get down into the weeds. So when it comes to truckload, can we get more individualized data about dry van versus reefer, for example? Can we get more data about which region seems to be more volume coming out of which regions as compared to other regions? I think we have a real opportunity to get data rich around that market report and to make it even more valuable. With the scrutiny of the supply chain, which this administration has had, which we're all thinking about, and even your friends who have no idea what you do every day, Kristy, are like, what's going on with the supply chain?
They're blaming it on me. It's your fault, is what they say.
Yeah, why aren't you fixing it? I wish I knew someone in the supply chain, right? That's what I hear all the time. I think the data now, the visibility of where things are, how, and where they need to be, is something that we're all focused on. We have that data because we have the technology to provide us that data through our own members and through the technology that our members use. So let's try to harness that and see how we can provide value writ large, to all the stakeholders. Obviously, proprietary data is something that we want to make sure we keep on to, but is there a way that we can interact that makes it more valuable or more efficient?
Yeah, I think you bring up a great point there, because that's something that we look at closely here. And when you have salespeople that are trying to sell, like, say, truckload, for example, and they're like, oh, we're always so, high, and we're $200 high or $300. There's some data out there that I know we look at that also compares the asset carriers versus, say, brokers. And that's, I think, a true testament of where you can see in the market where we might be able to, have success versus not. because of where maybe those assets are going. And you can see the rate changes and see how the difference is and be like, oh, this must be an asset carrier if that price, based on, what we're looking at through the data. So that's something I think that is very important for companies like myself that are out there, to talk back to the salespeople, and basically say, we're not everything to everyone, but at the end of the day, I think what the TIA can provide, like you said, drilling down that data and really helping them, look at and see where that stuff is at, what can help them, what areas might be difficult. We know what areas are challenges for us when we come up against some of the asset carriers. And a lot of times that stuff has to make sure we get to our salespeople and let them know too that, hey, sometimes it's going to be difficult in these specific markets and this is why. So that's definitely important.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I was just talking to a group of us, we're just chatting, and Chris Burrows made the point, which is the shippers don't bring us in because they want to pay us money. The shippers bring us in because they're wanting to find efficiencies and they're wanting to find capacity. They don't want to be a transportation department most of the time. They don't want to do that. That's not their core business. Their core business is whatever they make. And so they're bringing us in because it's actually better for them, not because they want to spend more on transportation.
Right. Absolutely. Good point. So, let's talk a little bit about leadership. As a woman leader in transportation, we probably have experienced some similar hurdles throughout our careers in this male-dominated sector. Can you discuss what leadership strategies have helped you the most and perhaps where you see room for growth?
Well, yes. I mean, I think absolutely it's been, the railroads in particular, as you know, because you deal with them every day, have been historically male dominated, logistics industry historically male dominated. I think I don't know if I have the secrets of success or the solutions. I will tell you what has helped me, which is this: being prepared, not being doubtful of yourself in a presentation, even if internally you feel doubtful. If you project confidence and you project certainty and you know the information that you're talking about and honestly really prepare for it, I think that helps. It helps everyone, but it certainly helps if you feel like you're at a disadvantage because of your gender. And so my story I remember is I went to CSX for many years. And when we first had leadership meetings, there were, 5 ladies waiting in line for the bathroom. By the time I left, there's lines out the door of ladies in the bathroom. So the good news is we're all making progress. And we've read any number of books about the potential for women that they provide a different perspective, that they should, successful companies include women in the leadership space, and they should be part of the leadership because it's actually better for your bottom line. So if you're just looking at purely from a mercenary perspective, you should absolutely have women as part of your, cadre of leaders because it makes you more profitable. But I think too, we're all kind of becoming more self-actualized and realizing that people have different strengths and all of that. Maybe women are not the ones to promote themselves as much as men. And I don't want to be gender biased. I have 2 sons and I have a husband, so I'm not trying to be gender biased. But maybe women are not the ones who promote themselves as much, but they are the doers. And so there's a place for that. We don't have to all be talking about how great we are. We can talk about how all the stuff that we're doing.
No, absolutely. That resonates actually with my Entrepreneur of the Year win. So had some discussions after that. So no, but that's a point well taking. Roughly 70% of my staff is women. And one thing that I have found is specifically women do bring a unique role to the place. And there's still spots for, men to be here as well that, that maybe women don't excel in or vice versa. It's just giving the opportunity to whoever can do the best job. So I appreciate your comments around that.
Yeah.
So what are your main passion projects today, either through the TIA or on a personal level, and why are they important to you?
Well, I just think we have such a great opportunity. I mean, we're joking about now that people know the supply chain and they're blaming us for not getting their baby formula or whatever. By the way, we don't have many members who work in baby formula. Just for the audience to know, we were trying to see if we could help there, and we don't have that much. But But I do think that's an opportunity. The pandemic has made the supply chain noteworthy and more understandable, and the role of brokers as a consequence has become more known and notable. I think, one of the first meetings I had with a member of Congress who I've known for years, we had a dinner together, and I went through what TIA does and what brokers do in the third-party logistics industry writ large, and he said, I didn't even know you all existed. So we have an opportunity, and this is a passion project, of how to communicate who we are, the role we have, how significant it is for the bottom line, how it makes the transportation marketplace more efficient, effective, and safe and ethical. And I think that, to me, is something that we want to become the thought leaders on. We can do that. We have so many smart people, you included, who can speak intelligently about the role of the broker and why it's so critical. And so that's what I really want to do. We have a communications firm that we just hired, and they are doing phenomenal things, just getting us out there and speaking about who we are, what we do, and why it's so important to know and to use a broker. I think that's a tremendous opportunity. And I know that there are many people in the transportation space who already knew about TIA, who already knew about brokers, but I think we want to broaden that because we have an opportunity. Again, the pandemic has made it so.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you 100%. We still hear to this day, even myself, why companies don't want to use brokers. And unfortunately, I feel like it's too much, and there just needs to be more re-education and also more awareness in the broker community as well.
Yeah.
So I think that's some, good stuff that the TIA is working on.
Yeah.
So, what's the best advice you ever got or advice you didn't take, and how did it change you?
Well, I had a great colleague who, for many years, he has these expressions, and they're actually it was at CSX, and they made a book about all his expressions. So it's unbelievable. Like nobody's done a book about my expressions yet. I can't wait for my book. But
my husband would love that, because he'd be like, the look on your face tells me something totally different than what you're saying, and we argue about it. So I totally get what you're saying.
Well, so one of his expressions, and again, he has a book of them, so I can't even pick one. But no, one of his expressions was, "There are many mansions." And so what he meant was that, let's just say you didn't get the project you wanted, or you didn't get the promotion you wanted, or you didn't get the, whatever it is that you didn't get that you thought you needed or you thought you wanted. That doesn't mean that that's it for you. That means that maybe your path is going in a different direction, and it could be just as good. You don't know. You can't get so fixated on what you think you need that you forget about what could be going on that could be also good for you. I thought that was really significant to me, and it was meaningful to me, because when he said that, he was saying it to me directly because I was upset because I didn't get a project. But what it meant was that I had to really think about, okay, am I going to be sort of disgruntled and a dissatisfied employee, or am I going to sort of put my energies towards, okay, what is it that I could do instead? I'm not getting this, but what can I do instead? And I thought that changed my whole perspective. When you're a leader, you have to manage people, and people are complicated. We're all complicated. And so it's one of those pieces of advice that I think made me a better employee, because it wasn't like I didn't develop a chip on my shoulder. I didn't do, because lots of things happen in life that you don't want. And your perspective and how you change your perspective really helps you how you get through it,
Yeah, no, I love that, because I do think that people sometimes go the opposite direction, and they don't do what you did and try to, take that different path. And I can say, even within my business, my sister and I had some issues at one point, because she wanted to be here working with me at the company, like in my seat. And it took her a very long time. And she finally said to me this past year, like, I just realized, that wasn't meant for me. I was meant to go on a different path, and, in a different way, like her realizing, like, she had to do something else that, was good for her, because clearly this wasn't meant for her. So, in another way that kind of just speaks volumes, to be able to take that perspective and find good out of it, because like you said, there's so many other things you could do. People just don't think about that. So
Right. The less you can take yourself out, the less you have yourself in it, the less you have yourself in your own way, I think the better ultimately for your career. And it's hard. I'm not saying it's easy. It's extremely hard because there's lots of things that your work can be your identity in many ways. And so if you feel like you're getting passed over, you feel like, oh, I'm getting passed over in life. But if you treat it like, all right, well, this was a setback, but it's not a setback permanently. I can do something else. I think that ultimately helps you, move forward.
Well, and the other thing too that we're finding is people just asking, well, what can I do to potentially, maybe it's not that particular project or direction, but like still like maybe move up or move in a different direction. What do I need to work on? So, for the listeners, like, don't be afraid to ask those questions because sometimes that's part of it too.
Yeah, I agree.
But, if you could give one piece of advice to a young woman coming into this industry, what would that be?
Well, Kristy, I want to hear your advice too, because I think one thing is listen to people's advice. That would be one.
Right.
And I'm serious about this because there are people who don't take advice very well. And it's not good. And you don't have to take everyone's advice. Certainly not. You really don't. But if people care about you and they're listening to you and they're really trying to help you find a solution, you should honestly look at that and think about it. And even if it means you have to think about yourself in a way that you don't want to think about yourself, I think it's so important to be open to constructive criticism. Again, if people are meaning it from a heartfelt place and they really are trying to be helpful, or they're making a suggestion, I think try to take your ego out of it if you can and really listen. And I honestly, that will pay off tenfold in your life if you can do that. I really do think so.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. That's actually probably the number one thing on my list, on top of making sure you do have a voice and you do network and you do reach out and ask questions. Because for me, it's been, a phenomenal thing that has helped me along the way, where I feel like a lot of women were afraid to ask or, speak up. I even had someone reach out to me the other day, felt like she was in a situation and didn't know what to do. And I asked her to explain it. And it was something as simple as, the manager coming in and it's her and two guys and saying, all right, guys, and not acknowledging her even as a woman, even, so, her reaching out, she was young. And I thought that was great. And just, like you said, too, the biggest thing is listening to constructive criticism. I had to do that last week myself. And it was something I already know that I need to do, that I was told, but, it's just refreshing though, because I think it solidifies that I know that I'm right. Everyone else sees it and I need to do it, type of thing. So it's extremely important. But no, I mean, thank you so much for sharing your journey. And, it's so impressive working with you at the TIA. I think it's a great organization and what you're doing. I've been there for a while, obviously. And I think just even the last, year working with you in particular has just been phenomenal. So kudos to you and the team for doing what you're doing, and, just looking forward to continuing to work with you all.
Well, Kristy, you do a terrific job for us. So we appreciate you. We appreciate members who are so talented in their own right, and then they give up their own time to dedicate to the TIA. I mean, and you're not getting paid for it, Kristy. You're just doing it. So we appreciate it.
No, absolutely. I enjoy doing it. Sometimes it's, hard to keep up, but, I figure it out, and it's important. It's important to the business, and then it's more important, to everybody out there. So, but no, thank you so much for being on the show today. And, we're at the end of the show now, and, thanks again for sharing your professional and personal journey. And, for more information about Anne Reinke and the TIA, please go to www.tianet.org or follow Anne on LinkedIn. Thanks for listening, and stay tuned for more inspiring stories with the LLC podcast.